Hey, all, thanks for joining us today. I'm here with Oliver Codd, the founder of Audio Ollie, which is the developer behind some of the most inspiring virtual instruments out there, including LA Modern Percussion, scoring synths, Nashville scoring strings, and more. They are incredibly well done and have made a big impact in the way many of us approach modern scoring and music creation. And today we have a little discussion with the person who built them. So thanks for joining our
Yeah,
little interview podcast here.
my pleasure. I'm happy to be here and speaking to. I was telling you last time we talked, I consider you one of the original sample devs, in terms of big orchestral productions done in some of my favorite rooms and stuff like that. So it's an honor to be speaking with you as well.
Oh man, cool. Well, hey, listen, what in the heck pulled you in to this world of developing virtual instruments?
Yeah, so it was a kind of organic process. It was like going way back now, but I was doing trailer composition and stuff like that. I was very much into the trailer music world. And this is 10 plus years ago in my early 20s. And so I was doing that stuff and it was great at first because it was a way for me as a composer to make a bit of money while simultaneously kind of refining my composing chops and production chops and all that stuff. And um, it was really cool, but very quickly I realized that it wasn't exactly satisfying to me from a creative standpoint because I was kind of more geared towards orchestral film score esque music. And at the time that I started getting into trailer music, it was kind of shifting more away from that stuff and into sound design and all of that kind of big bombastic sound effects and stuff like that, which was cool. And I enjoyed working on it, but ultimately it wasn't the path I wanted to take. And so at some point in that journey, I started a YouTube channel, which I called Audio Ollie. And I kind of just started posting videos about random stuff like room acoustics and mixing and some of my takes on music publishing and stuff related to the trailer music world that I was taking part in. And then at some point, I just kind of decided I was going to make a custom virtual instrument, which was scoring synths. So that ended up being, it was initially just going to be a private thing that I did for myself, but I ended up kind of recording it and spending, a little bit of money doing it. And eventually I shared some of it with some of my composer friends and they kind of convinced me to put it out as an, actual commercial library. And so I did that eventually. And that was kind of the birth of Audio Ollie, the sample development company. But it really kind of originated as just me kind of telling my story and doing stuff on YouTube. So from the beginning, it was just a very personal project.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was organic. It was kind of like, I was interested in recording synths in an actual acoustic environment. And there wasn't a virtual instrument or library or sample collection that had really done that yet. And so the whole idea spawned out of kind of creative necessity as a composer. And then that kind of just took me in one direction and I've been doing that ever since. So
That's great. Yeah. So let's just talk about scoring synths for a second.
yeah.
I'll just explain sort of the process from a high level, like what it took to do that and what sets it apart from just like a synth library.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say the big thing that sets it apart is that we are capturing the actual room that we were shooting these sounds into. It
How
was
did
a
you do
good,
that? Like what?
so yeah, it was a good starting project because from a budget perspective, I didn't need to fork out a lot of money for players, musicians and stuff like that. So basically, all I had to do was rent the studio. So we rented Ocean Way in Nashville, which is it's a beautiful studio built into an old church. It's got a really unique acoustic, actually. It's got a very defined kind of early reflection, so it's got a lot of dimension, but it doesn't have a very long reverb tail. So it's good if you want to have a little bit of flexibility in terms of kind of adding your own ambience, but also giving the sense of three-dimensionality to whatever you record in it. Anyway, so what I ended up doing was taking one of my ATC loudspeakers, which is one of these big three-way active speakers, and we just brought it to Ocean Way and set it up in the middle of the room. And then I hired a really talented mixing engineer named Nick Spezia, who does a lot of the orchestral recording out in Nashville. Because I wanted all of the mics set up to reflect an orchestral mic setup. So we had a Decatree and mid and surrounds, rear surrounds, and all of that stuff. Because really the goal was to be able to mix these synth sounds in to an orchestral context. So if I wanted
Right.
it to feel like it was part of, the orchestra from the Decatree, then I'd use those mics. I wanted it further back in the room, but that was the real concept behind the project.
It's a great concept. It first of all, the library is fantastic, and
Oh, thanks.
it's really good if you're somebody who writes more cinematic. We overuse
Mhm.
that term, but orchestral stuff, and we want to add those colors in there. That's cool. So, did you have somebody actually playing the synth, or did you
No.
have a recording that was kind of piped through? Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I guess that was another benefit of this project is you could pre-record and program everything. So I basically had, a Logic session, 2-day long Logic session full of pre-recorded Moog material that I had programmed and sampled in there. And
Okay.
yeah, so it was all pre-done, and which was great too, because you can plan very specifically what you're going to do in a certain amount of time. Because as you
Right.
know, when you're
Yeah.
doing live players and you have especially big budget sessions with a ton of musicians, like time is your most valuable asset.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
have to redo takes, it gets expensive very quickly. So this was like a really easy intro into sample development.
Right.
But
Yeah. You just look at the length of the Pro Tools file that you made, and then
right.
just go with
And
that.
click record. And if a truck drives by the studio or something, maybe you pause it for a second. But yeah.
Okay, so you started with is the scoring synths was the first thing you did. I didn't know that.
That was the very first
And
thing. Yeah.
okay, and then after that, what was next? Was it just in terms of the strings of the percussion? Did you do this?
We did percussion next. Yeah.
So tell me about that. That involved humans now,
A
actually
lot of
playing
humans.
instruments.
Yeah.
So first of all, like, where did you record it? What is that like? Who did you record with? Tell me a little bit about LA Modern Percussion.
Yeah. Well, so after I put out Scoring Synths and sold it commercially and realized that there was an actual market there, and I generated enough sales to have confidence that I could do another project and maybe up the scale a bit. Then it kind of came back to the same place I was at before Scoring Synths, which was like, what library would I want to build for myself as a composer? Like, what would be my dream library? And I've always been very interested in the kind of more modern film score production, and your Hans Zimmer stuff. And Alan Meyerson was an engineer that I very early kind of felt something. I got an emotional reaction when I heard his mixes, in combination with the amazing productions that were coming out, particularly from like the remote control guys and stuff. um and so I was like, if I could do any library next, I'd want to do a big percussion library with Alan Meyerson.
Hmm.
And I didn't expect him to be willing to do it, but I'm like, I'll send him an email and see if he calls back and whatever. And so I did that, and sure enough, he called, and I just told him, like, look, I'd love to come out to LA and record percussion the way you'd like to record it, and like, let's do all your mic setup, and you can mix it too, and let's go all out with this one. And he was down to do it, and so we just kind of scrapped a team together and did it. So yeah, we went out to Warner Bros. We used Warner Bros. Studios, which he likes for percussion. It's kind of a smaller room. It's got a bit tighter sound than maybe Sony or Fox.
Yeah.
And we got 4 players for the session. And yeah, we did it, and it was honestly one of my best experiences as a composer, sample developer, whatever so far, because, working with awesome players in a really cool room, but also just being able to work with one of your musical heroes was really inspiring as well.
That's
So
cool. Yeah, and there's like, so tell me about like when you're at, because I think people watching this don't know, like if you've ever been to LA and you get to go to these scoring stages, it's like it's the coolest thing.
it
It
is.
still is. Every
Yeah.
single time, at least that I've done it, it's always, it feels like this because there's so much history in these places. They
Yeah.
they kind of invented scoring,
I know.
uh, and you know, so this the three. I'll just say like the three stages, right? Is Sony, Fox, and Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
and Warner Brothers is probably one of the most used because
It
even
seems
though it's
like
not the
these days.
largest,
Yeah.
uh, it's used a lot. It's a great crew. Um, but yeah, no, that's cool. So tell me about, was that like, working with Alan, and was it a huge prep, a lot of prep that went into, telling the musicians what to play? Was there improvisation involved, like figuring out what you wanted to record?
Yeah.
How much goes into that?
I mean, yeah. So going back to your first question, like being on the actual lot, it's quite an experience because it feels very exclusive. You know, you have to get permission to be on there, and they're very like who's with you. You have to have passes and stuff. And but as soon as you get through and you're going around in your little golf carts and stuff, and you see the big water tower and all these old movie posters and scoring stages, it definitely is cool to be there. Especially for me, a guy from the Midwest. It's just like it's a completely kind of fantasy environment. But anyway, yeah. So for this project, we did do as much preparation as we could beforehand, but we also improvised on the spot, kind of based on the results we were getting and some of the stuff we liked. So we had a kind of basic score written out and printed out for the type of patches we were going to do. So we had a series of different patch types, but the majority of them used the kind of Junkie XL approach where you're doing, instead of like 7 dynamics and 5 round robin, you're doing 30 something dynamics and no round robin. And then you map that out on the keyboard. And so we did a lot of that. And we basically just had the players start from, as light as they could play all the way up the range. But we'd have them experiment with different drums and playing styles and combinations and stuff like that. And we'd kind of iterate based on what we heard in the mixing room. Alan he has these big BMW 802 or whatever they're called, Nautilus speakers, so we got like a really great sound just in the mixing room. So it'd be like, if we had them throw a towel on top of the skin of the taiko to kind of mute it a little bit, and we really like that, then we'd say, all right, let's go back and do that with the tom ensemble and that kind of stuff. Or if we like
Right.
really loved a certain sound, we'd say, all right, let's not just do the dynamic spread recording technique. Let's do a full round robin up to 7 dynamic kind of thing. So we were doing a combination of pre-planning and improvising, basically.
Okay. So what did you end up working with in terms of, not to get too technical and nerdy here, but like round robin versus more dynamic levels? It's like finding that balance.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
like
and
instrument specific or?
kind of. I mean, to me, I actually really like having everything mapped by dynamics because
But let me
you,
just explain for some people that might be watching.
yeah.
So there's two things to sampling, and maybe you can explain what's the difference between dynamics and round. What is round robin?
Okay. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So around, yeah. Sorry, sometimes when you're
I
speaking to
know.
another
Like I want to
sample
make sure
developer,
everyone's involved here.
right? So round robin is when you sample the same dynamic or iteration of a sample repeatedly, so that if you trigger that sample over and over again, you're not getting the exact same sample twice in a row.
Right.
So traditionally, a lot of us will do, say, 7 dynamic layers. So dynamics being how soft or how loud you're playing. And then
Yeah.
at each dynamic level, you're maybe doing 5, 7, 11 round robin, so that when people just play quietly, they're not going to get any machine gun effect with the samples.
Yeah. Yeah. The machine
Yeah,
gun effect, which is like, right, when you have an exact audio file playing multiple times,
yeah,
it
you get this
sounds fake. It
yeah, it's
loses
kind of
that like realistic organic.
It
Because each time you
does.
hit the drum, even if it's exactly the same way, there's always a difference.
It
Yeah.
does. But if you, in theory, if you capture enough dynamic layers, you do 50 dynamic layers, um, and you never trigger the same sample twice in a row with your playing, or usually you'd adjust it with programming, then it's not an issue. And one of the benefits to that, if you're like really particular about mixing and production, is it gives you a little bit more control over your sound because you're not having this automatic cycling of samples. You get to choose very specifically which samples are triggering when you program it in. So I like that approach, but a lot of people like to just be able to play and, never have to worry about the machine gun thing, which is totally reasonable as well.
Yeah. So what is your I guess a good question would be like how do you balance how do you figure out the difference between whether to go more round robin or more dynamics? Is it based on the instrument?
I mean, so with this particular project, it was kind of about prioritizing time based off what we were really interested in from what we were hearing, because we only had 2 days of recording. So it was like, let's start with the dynamic approach for certain sounds, and then let's capture more of whatever we're really liking. And it ended up being the case that we primarily captured the full round robin and the dynamic split for these bigger ensemble groups. So it was like the taiko ensembles, the tom ensembles, the bass drum ensembles. We really gravitated towards. So we're like, all right, we'll get these in as much detail as possible. And then some of these more auxiliary instruments like shakers or, piatti and things like that, were like, I think the normal dynamic split is totally fine in this case. Um, so yeah, we were kind of eh, strategizing how we were going to approach capturing the samples based on just feedback that we liked, and then the amount of time we had, because it's always a limiting factor with these big projects.
Yeah. And how much time did you have? Like,
So we had 2 full days at Warner Bros. And then we did 2 days mixing at Alan's studio. And each day at Warner Bros, I think it was like 12 hours. They were long days.
okay, so proper like a triple session almost.
Yeah. Yeah. They were really long days, but you have
Okay.
to stop for lunch, and there was some time to set up and get our levels
Yeah.
right and all that stuff. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, I think you and the sound of it is just it's so well mixed, and it has that it just blends so well. I think
Yeah.
that's the really thing that
Well, that's
sets
Alan
it
for
apart.
you. I mean,
Yeah.
so I'll give you a little bit of a background on that, because I think a lot of people uh, admire Alan Meyerson. Like 99% of the sound of that library came purely from his microphone setups.
Mm.
Like when it came to mixing at his house, it was so much more minimal than I was expecting. I thought he was going to be doing all these crazy tricks and maybe using boutique hardware and stuff that he might have used and stuff. And it's like he got so much of the sound just through his mic combinations that it was maybe, he likes to tighten the start times, the transients of the individual microphone positions, so that you don't have any flamming effect.
Mm.
Um, and then maybe it's just like a little bit of EQ to cut out some of the low mid frequencies or something like that. But I was amazed with how much mileage we got out of all of the different mics. The ribbon mics compared to the condensers and the dynamics, it almost felt like two completely different drums. It was just cool to me. It was definitely a revelation, because I, in my mind, imagined that most of his sound was coming from his post processing, but it's like, no, it's all the
That's
recording.
really interesting. I always thought it was some kind of magic on the post production side.
Mm-mm.
So that's interesting for us to learn from. Is like it comes down to the original like recording of something.
Yeah.
Like make that great first.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not about like 8,000 different plugins to try to copy a sound. It's just like use the first source of
Yeah. But
and go
I
from
mean,
there.
the room's a big part of it too. The room is
Yeah.
going to contribute to the sound, and he's got some really interesting old ribbon microphones and stuff. And he'd always kind of listen to the drum before placing the close mics. Like he would be able to say, all right, this is exactly where I need to put this mic and that kind of stuff, which was, I guess
Yeah.
just comes from being a master at your craft.
Right. It's like the thing you can't really learn. You
Yeah.
do something for how many years?
Yeah. 40 years or whatever.
Yeah. That's so cool that you got to work with him. I'm a huge fan too. So,
Yeah.
it's great that we can now kind of play around with that percussion in our own music. As
Yeah,
well.
it is. Yeah.
So let's talk so real quick. You then went on to doing the string library in Nashville,
Mhm.
which was great because it's just, at least in the whole, the amount of instruments that are out there. We had the LA stuff, we have the London stuff, but we didn't really have Nashville, which is a very popular place for scoring. A lot of people go there.
Yeah.
A lot of video game scoring. And so when you came out with that, I was like, oh, that's good, because people are doing mock-ups. It's good to show, hey, what is it going to sound like when we're there? So I don't know. Tell me about that real quick. What went into that? That's probably just leveling things up again, right? More people.
Yeah. Yeah. Much bigger, much bigger project, because recording percussion, it's single samples and stuff like that. When you're getting into legato and all that stuff, it's so time consuming.
Yeah.
And we have like 10 times the amount of players there, and it's a remarkable undertaking. But yeah, we did Nashville for multiple reasons. I actually really like some of the scores I've heard come out of Nashville. Some of these, like you said, video games and some TV shows. I think John Debney's recorded a couple of scores there that I really liked. It's just got a more intimate sound, but it's drier for sure. It's totally different than a bigger scoring stage. But yeah, we went there because we at that point I had a pretty good relationship with the studio and the engineer, and a bit easier of a process to get 40 players to record in Nashville than it was in LA. LA, is complicated in terms of the union stuff as it relates to sampling. So we decided to take that route, and I'm glad we did for that project. But yeah, it was it's interesting too, because I found that from what I've heard, like the Nashville musicians have a different sound to the LA musicians, which, have a different sound to the London musicians. But, you had some players there that were like amazing fiddle players and stuff like that. And they just like do vibrato differently than your kind of golden age Hollywood orchestra and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a unique experience.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So then how many days of recording was that? And because to get legato, I'm always trying to tell people legato. First of all, I think legato is overrated. I shouldn't say that.
I agree with you. I do.
But it's something that like, it sounds really cool, like when you're playing on the keyboard and the thing slides up to the next note and it feels realistic. But realistically, you're not using legato as much.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like trying to encourage people, like, it's not necessarily about the legato realism, it's the programming side of it. Having said that, we still have to do legato. All right. That's my side note. But so like, how did you do the legato? Did you do every single interval? Like, explain how legato is recorded for those that have never or don't know anything about it. And
yes. Well, yeah. So basically, say you're not doing legato, you're doing every note of an instrument's range or every other note, however detailed you want to go. Sometimes you can get away with like sampling in fifths or something, but with the strings, I think we sampled chromatically. And so you do every note, but then in this case, you have to do every note with every transition to every other note. So you're going da 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 da, forward and back. And so you can imagine if you're doing that with every note, with every interval, with each section of the orchestra, it's a tremendous amount of time. And it's also taxing on the player. So you have to be conscious of the fact that a musician isn't going to want to sit there for like 10 hours and just do that repeatedly, you know, it's
Right.
going to be taxing on them. So you have to factor in breaks. So maybe it's like, let's do the violins and then let's switch to the cello, back to the violins. You know,
Yeah. Right.
there's a lot there, but it's a very, very tedious process. And you know, it's also kind of hard to assess whether or not you got the right recording at the sessions. So
Mm.
what we were doing was kind of trying to bring some of the recordings in to contact in real time and kind of
Oh, really? Okay.
audition them to make
Yeah.
sure that, you know, but we ended up sampling there for like 5 days in a row, which is a long time. And then we actually ended up having to go back to do a couple pickup sessions because sometimes you do all this recording and then you get back and you're like, we didn't get that quite right, or it just, you know, the cello aren't quite there, whereas the violins are. And so if you want it to be as good as possible, then you have to go back. And anyway, it's a very, very arduous process, but
Hmm.
um, rewarding at the same time.
Well, we
It's
thank you for
cool.
going through that process.
Well, you
We
have
all
as well,
benefit
right?
from, yeah. But so then, uh, I guess from a composer perspective, you know, we're both writers and we work with virtual instruments, and we have a community, at least through Cinesamples and through Musio, where we listen to a lot of other composers' work and we try to give feedback and help them, uh, improve their production quality. You know, and what you've heard, at least in your experience, what's a great way or a few tips that you think of off the top of your head about getting the best sound possible out of virtual instruments?
Yeah, I mean, my take has always been, and this kind of goes back to the conversation we're having about Alan's recordings, is to use material that is recorded as best as it possibly can be. Because in a way, it removes this element of having to then go and tweak your sound to try and make it sound the way you want it to. You know, if it just sounds right, then to me, it makes it a lot easier to then go and arrange a piece of music when you're not thinking something's not quite sounding right with these violins, like they're too nasally or there's not enough ambience or something, you know.
Yeah.
When things
Okay.
just sound good and you can play them in, I find that things just naturally come together a lot easier, and then the end result ends up being a lot better than if you have to tweak stuff. So prioritizing just great source material, um, and using sounds that evoke an emotional response rather than what you think might be technically right, which kind of goes to the legato thing. Like, I think a lot of people think they need legato because that's technically more realistic. But it's like if you have a patch that sounds beautiful and doesn't have legato and it's making you feel something,
Yeah.
then use that. You know, it's like you have to be guided based off of your feelings and not some tech specs or whatever, you know?
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. Um, because I don't know if people do this anymore, if they really care about the tech specs, but we got to get away from that. I think it's like,
I,
how does it just sound? Is it useful? Can I just like, when I put my hand on that keyboard, is it inspiring? And, and I felt that a lot of modern plugins have, in my opinion, this is my opinion, that too many graphical user interface bells and whistles that
mhm,
no one ever touches.
yeah,
And some are important, but like it's gotten out of hand. And I think it's all about our keyboard. And when we put our
yeah,
hands out on the keyboard,
mhm,
is it automatically inspiring? All right, I'll move the CC1 up and down a little bit.
right,
It should start there. It should like should
yeah,
be great from that perspective.
yeah. No, I
And
agree with you. I agree completely. I mean, and then that kind of puts the burden on the developer to make sure that things just sound great when they play the
yeah,
keyboard, and they don't have to turn a bunch of knobs to make it sound the way they want it to.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I agree. Um, Simplicity is important. You know, it's a hard balance though as a developer because it's like there's one part of you that's always thinking like, should you add all this extra stuff to accommodate that like 1% of users that might want it, or do you focus on the meat and potatoes that 99% of the people are gonna be using? And I think the
Yeah, I
answer is
think
obvious.
you have to do both because I think you really do have to serve the professional,
Yeah,
um, and figure out what they want. But not everybody will need 5 microphone positions.
exactly.
And we have tons of mic positions in our stuff too. And I don't use them that often. I'll use them for a few instruments like harp or celeste or something that
Hmm.
where you really need it. But you have to add it so that people have that option. And I think it's just a matter of like quality and integrity and just having that
Yeah,
option for people so that they can explore it at some point. Even
I,
though
I
only
I agree.
1% of people use it, it's important to have.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes like having too many options is detrimental to the composer. It's like you don't really want to be trying to figure out which of the 20 microphone positions to use. If I'm just given one or two, I'm not going to worry about it. You know what I mean? I'm just going to go from there. And but yeah, that's something I've been learning over time is like just because we captured this many mic positions doesn't mean we need to include them. So it kind of is more a conversation of which microphone positions are really adding something new or special to the sound. Because oftentimes, like maybe three of them are so similar that I can't really decide which one I'd even want between them. So it's like just pick one and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we'll kind of like think about the future here a little bit. I mean, the world has changed dramatically the last 5 years or so, just not just in the music world, but just the world. And it's kind of, as business owners, you often have to think about, well, what's the future look like? How can we, build things that people want? What do you see the next, say, 5 to 10 years looking like for not just a virtual instrument world, but just music and creation?
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, like I have, losing sleep.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
I'll
uh,
I'll give you my take on it. Like obviously this AI thing is like it's a thing, whether or not people like it or think it's going to replace them. It's definitely real, and I think there are going to be a lot of changes. I'm concerned about the I don't know how to put it, like the kind of middle class of composers. That's probably the wrong way to put it, but guys like me who, when I was starting out in my 20s, had opportunities with publishing companies to, s- first of all, start earning some income, but also just like developing my craft while making a little bit of money and being able to support myself and stuff. So my concern is with maybe AI and that kind of thing that it may start to chip away at the opportunities for that younger group of people who need that time to develop their craft, but also need to earn an income. Like it would be a real shame to see new composers just completely out of work because there's only a handful of jobs available, for the kind of top tier film composers and stuff. So I'm concerned from a production music standpoint. Um, but it's one of those things where whether it's AI or the internet or the printing press, it's like this stuff's going to happen and we have to adapt. And so we'll just see what happens. But what I hope to see is more individuals kind of starting personal businesses or brands in the music world and less kind of massive corporate entities that are kind of monopolizing the industry, but that don't have a personal interest in music or the musical community. Like, I think it'd be really cool to see more and more kind of solopreneur type guys who are just making the virtual instruments they want to make or making the music they want to make and building kind of little niche audiences and being able to have a thriving business that's not necessarily all about profit motive and maximizing revenue and always pushing that line higher and higher, but is, personally satisfying, brings value to the world and the music community and to themselves, and is operating at a scale that's maybe a little bit smaller and under this idea of bringing more value than more profit necessarily. Finding that middle ground that benefits everyone, and you don't start losing quality, and you don't start, sacrificing your morals for more and more growth and power. Like somewhere in between, I think would be cool to see. And I think we might see more of that actually.
Okay, yeah. So I think more like almost like democratizing things a little bit more, or not just like more people will have more opportunities. Uh,
Yeah. Or just, like more people are doing their own thing, and it's at a
yeah,
smaller scale, but it's like it's more about the craft and the passion and the community than
yeah,
this kind
yeah,
of traditional corporate capitalism approach or something. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I see it, and my daughter listens to all sorts of music, and it's incredible the amount of stuff that's out there that's really good, but you just don't know about it
Yeah.
because there isn't like a multi-billion-dollar agency pushing it,
Hmm.
but it's out there. You just have to find it. So perhaps that's, good stuff will still, people will find it.
Yeah, they
Uh,
will. They
and
will.
I mean, do you think that people, I've been following the AI trend as well. And at first I was really spooked. I was like, man, this is really good. Like,
Hmm.
and it's still getting better. Right.
Right.
But it seems, I don't have the data from any of these companies, but it seems like people aren't that impressed with it. I think there's a lot of people that are having a lot of fun with it. Uh, like Suno and Udio,
Yeah.
and I've played around with it. It's fun. But I haven't seen people really using it for creative purposes, and it doesn't replace. I mean, my philosophy is that, like, there's nothing like actually creating and being in charge of every single note that you choose,
Hmm.
and spending the time to learn something difficult
Exactly.
is
Yeah. I mean,
valuable.
yeah.
That maybe, you can get a little maybe taste of that when you do a prompt, and you can have a lot of fun with it that way. But I think it might not be long lasting,
Yeah,
in my
maybe,
opinion.
or it'll evolve into just another tool that we use. Like
Right.
there are some examples where you are actually able to put in MIDI and then it'll sing back or play a violin back. Like, if it heads
Yeah.
in that direction, that's cool. And like I did some experiments where this was actually kind of interesting. Where on Suno you can eh, put in your own recording, so I could sing a tune and play just the piano real quick on my iPhone and plug it in, and it'll play your song, but it'll start adding some layers and it'll put a voice on there, and it kind of takes your initial idea forward a lot quicker than it would to program that in yourself, and maybe just gives you ideas which then you can then bring back in and finesse yourself. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Some kind of hybrid approach to it all. Yeah. And I
yeah.
think
But
that
generally,
might.
I don't think the creative community is very warm towards people just putting in a prompt and having it generate a piece of music and then calling it their own.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that's going to fly, because I just don't think that their peers are going to respect them for it. So I think you're going to see a lot more of the kind of funny parody music that comes out of it. But I don't think most
Yeah.
people are going to feel very satisfied. Like it takes away the self-expression component of making music if you're just putting in a prompt. But
Yeah. And I struggle with it because I don't want to come across like a boomer or something where I'm just like, oh, this technology and these kids, they don't.
yeah.
I think we can't ignore it. Um, but
Mm-mm.
yeah, I still think I don't know, there's no replacement for learning something difficult and getting good at it. Music's
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, like, learn theory. I think anybody can learn it. Learn how to properly voice an A flat minor chord in the strings. Like it's
Yeah.
basic stuff. That also makes your virtual instruments sound better too when
No,
you're
yeah.
adding musicality, because using virtual instruments they're not going to compose the music for you.
No, exactly.
They're just going to do what you tell them to do,
Yeah.
and there's no replacement for that. And virtual instruments aren't for everybody. You know,
Right. Well, the other
they're
thing is,
for
sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah,
with a virtual instrument, you're still actually playing it too. So there's this like level of extension of your own body when you're recording whatever you're playing in through a virtual instrument on your keyboard, assuming you're using a keyboard.
Right.
and that has a lot of merit too. The actual performance component is always going to
That's
be
true. Yeah.
valid.
Like the subtle choices that you make and the, little mistakes that you make and, you're off grid a little bit.
Hmm.
All of that
Exactly.
comes across.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think that's something I'm really interested in and you were talking about this earlier, but it's just like really making the virtual instrument as much of a true instrument as you possibly can, just with the keys and the mod wheel and whatever you have. Like, how can you make that as expressive as possible so that it's a performative tool more than just a means of inputting data into your DAW?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Yeah. It should be something that should easily be able to play. Uh, yeah.
yeah,
Like switching key switches. I know we need it sometimes, but like, you know,
yeah. I don't like key
you,
switches.
I don't either, but you do. It's
Yeah, no, people
you
want
need it.
them. Yeah, if you don't have them, then people complain about it, and that's valid. So,
Right. Unless you had like a 4-dimensional keyboard or something. I mean, key
well,
switches is the only way to do it.
NPE controllers, but
That's
but
true.
the thing is, the more dimension you add to your keyboard or whatever, the more the user has to learn how to actually use it. It becomes more
Right. Yeah.
complicated. So it's like learning a new instrument all over again. So that's the challenge.
Well, there's nothing wrong with learning hard things.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but tell that
Cool.
to an 18-year-old these days.
Yeah, those teenagers, blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Now, I hear stuff by like some younger kids that's blowing me away. Like some of
No,
the
I
stuff they're
know.
doing, and they come at it with a fresh perspective. And I'm like, how did you do that? Um, so what's
Yeah.
next for you and Audio Ollie? Do you got anything going on?
Well, so this is yet to be announced, but we'll be launching a sister company to Audio Ollie coming up here in the next few weeks, which is really exciting. It's still based around virtual instruments and all of that stuff, but it's a kind of completely different take on it. So it's not replacing Audio Ollie. Audio Ollie is going to continue, but this is going to be kind of a complementary business that is catering to, maybe a slightly different audience, a broader audience. But I'm excited to reveal more about it because it's really in line with what we were just talking about, placing an emphasis on the expression of the MIDI controllers and kind of getting out of the complicated user interface so that the user interface is your keyboard and maybe a handful of macros that you can turn. But I want everything to feel tactile and, um, you know, just expressive in a true instrument sense, if that makes sense. Um, so that's coming out
I love it.
sometime in the next few weeks if I can pull it off. But yeah, I'm excited to share more about it.
All right. Well, it's a good teaser.
Yeah,
And
there you go.
well, cool. Well, how can people find out about Audio Ollie and
Yeah.
more
You can go
information?
to audioollie.com. You can sign up for the mailing list, which I recommend. I'm going to eventually uh, basically tell everyone on my Audio Ollie mailing list about this new sister company if they're interested in it. So you can sign up there. And, you can follow me on social media if you feel like it. My name's Oliver Codd. I try and talk to as many customers and fellow composers as possible. It's really important to me to maintain a sense of community with, the people who share an interest in music and stuff like that. So, yeah, you can find me anywhere basically.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging with me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And
And
congrats on Musio and the marketplace launch, and really excited to see where you guys go with that in the next year or so. It's exciting.
oh, thanks, Ben.
Yep.
All right. Well,
All
we'll
right.
talk soon.
Sounds good, Mike. I'll see you later.
See ya.